Welcome into HQ Spotlight. I'm Emily Proud. We are almost there, friends. We have to battle through a few more preseason games and then football that counts. Now, you and I aren't playing in those games, but we are working to figure out what's real and what's an overreaction. That said, something that is real is that Cam Ward is under pressure, both from his protection and perception, being the #1 overall pick. So let's start with the first part. Again, the 49ers, the Titans preseason opener, he struggled. Throws were there that he missed, and overall just a clunky debut for the Brian Daboll offense. But it's the preseason. Daboll doesn't have to show all of his cards, but the stat line, not great. 5 of 12, 57 yards, got 2 rushing touchdowns. The Titans, they did win the game for what it's worth, which, as we know, it's worth nothing. So we welcome in our friend Ryan Wilson here to help us make sense of what we have seen so far in the preseason. So let's start with Cam Ward. The premise is simple. You're going to tell me if this is an overreaction or if it's reality. Cam Ward's less than stellar first game is a real concern for the Titans heading into his second season.
Hey, Emily, good to see you. This is an overreaction. And look, Cam Ward is playing on a team that was not very good last year, nor were they good the year before when they drafted him first overall. And he is the centerpiece of the rebuild. And I thought he did a lot of good things last year, especially as the season progressed. But one of the things we saw in the San Francisco preseason game that you rightly described as meaning nothing is that he did a lot of the things that got him in trouble, both at Washington State and then early on at the U, in terms of trying to do too much. And we know he is so good out of structure and ability to make plays outside of the pocket with the arm strength and the athleticism. And it felt like sometimes he was just trying to do too much and not take what was there in that preseason game. Again, I don't read too much into it. I think it means very little, in part because, as you know, this is Brian Daboll's first go-round in an actual game situation with his new quarterback. And the other thing is that they have a lot of new faces. They were very busy in the offseason trying to surround Cam Ward with playmakers, so they're getting acclimated. The offensive line is going to be a concern, especially the interior offensive line in terms of health. And the other thing is they're going to play a lot because Robert Saleh, the new head coach, said there's going to be first-team snaps probably in the first half of these next 2 games, which is a lot more than what you see from most teams in this 3-game version of the preseason. So not worried yet. I think it's another reaction. We'll see what happens in the next 2 meaningless football games.
Yeah, you have a new offensive coordinator, a new head coach, some new pieces around him, like you mentioned. So the anticipation is that it was not going to be perfect to start, but when you see those accuracy issues crop up again, I know my friends in Nashville, that immediately concerns them, but way too early to be out on Cam Ward after the first preseason game of his sophomore campaign. Meanwhile, not a great debut for Tua in Atlanta. He said he was frustrated and disappointed with his performance. Overreaction or reality? The Falcons offense will struggle with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback.
I think it's an overreaction for a few reasons, Emily. Number one, we saw Tua at his best in South Florida with Mike McDaniel because Mike McDaniel made a point to make that offense run through Tua, and that is something that new head coach Kevin Stefanski is really adept at. There's going to be a lot of play-action passes, going to be a lot of timing throws, anticipation throws, getting the ball out quickly in the middle of the field, all things that Tua is really good with, good doing. And while they don't have Tyreek Hill or Jaden Waddle in Atlanta, they do have guys named Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts and Drake London. They drafted Zachariah Branch, the burner playmaker that can do a little bit of everything out of Georgia. So that said, I think they're in a pretty good spot, but much like Cam Ward figuring things out with Brian Daboll, this is a situation where Tua's on a new team, in a new offense, with a new coach, and trying to figure things out on the fly. And the other thing is there's no one really breathing down his neck in terms of competition because, as we know, Michael Penix Jr. is still coming back from that ACL. So I think it was not necessarily rust because they haven't worked together yet, but just sort of trying to figure things out together with Stefanski and Tua. And I think they will be relatively fine. There are a lot of questions on defense, and they're in a division that usually isn't considered that tough, but they're not the favorites. But I think we will see a better version of Tua with Stefanski as we get through this a little further into August.
Yeah, the word I used was struggle. The phrase you used is relatively fine. So we'll see how that turns out there. Let's look at some more positive performances. Speaking about DJ Moore, I mean, is this it? Did the Bills finally get Josh Allen, his wide receiver one, the long-awaited role that they've been looking for? So, overreaction to reality. DJ Moore can help lift the Bills into a top 10 offense in 2026.
Yeah, and it's a reality because they were already a top 10 offense without DJ Moore and without that number one receiver that they thought they had in Keon Coleman. Last year, they were 4th overall in EPA offensively, 1 in the rushing game because, of course, James Cook was a big part of that, as was Josh Allen. And then number 4 in the passing in terms of EPA. So they're in a good spot, and DJ Moore only makes them better, makes them more explosive. And I know that DJ left Chicago on terms that some fans weren't happy about, that last play interception that ended their season, that maybe DJ had something to do with, but that doesn't matter in terms of what he brings on a play-to-play basis. I mentioned Keon Coleman still trying to figure things out. Khalil Shakir is one of the best number 2, number 3 receivers in the NFL. Josh Palmer has flashed, and then we know about James Cook's ability as a receiver, not to mention those tight ends. The other issue, of course, is that Sean McDermott's no longer there, but Joe Brady was the offensive coordinator a year ago, and he's calling the plays this year. So I think they're in a really good spot. And you know what? They're in a new stadium, so they have that to lean on. I think that this is the best situation on the field in terms of the roster for the Buffalo Bills. The issue, unfortunately, is last year, no Joe Burrow, no Lamar Jackson, no Patrick Mahomes, and the Bills still couldn't get it done.
Yes, that was certainly the issue for them last season. But as you said, you got that new stadium bump. So certainly more positivity there up in Western New York. I knew this was coming. I mean, despite the fact that both Mendoza and Kirk Cousins looked good, we're already doing it here. But Ryan, I'm going to keep this statement fairly tame for you. Overreaction or reality, Fernando Mendoza will start by week 8.
Yeah, that's a reality. And it's unlike the Giants situation a year ago in which Brian Dable was coaching for his job and got Jackson Dart out there in late September, I believe is what the timeline was there. And more a function of when you're the first overall pick, you're going to play. Cam Ward started last year in week 1 and started the entirety of the season. And while you do sign Kirk Cousins to allow some grace period, a bridge, if you will, from the time you draft Fernando Mendoza until the time he actually plays, he looked good in his preseason debut, and that's a better start than having the conversation that he didn't know what he was doing out there. And then you build on that. He's looked good in the joint practices in recent days, going up against the Houston Texans defense that we know is legit. And you don't turn a franchise around that was as bad as the Raiders have been in recent years by leaning on Kirk Cousins unless he's out there throwing darts and that team is undefeated. So I think the plan all along, whether it was verbalized or not, was that we're going to see Fernando by the midway point of the season, if not sooner, because you have to find out what you have in this young man, and you want to get the most out of him on that rookie deal so you can build a team around him. We've seen teams have to pay quarterbacks on their second contracts, and that means you can't pay other players. So I expect by week 8 we will see Fernando out there. Hopefully Kirk stays healthy the whole time, and that won't be the reason he plays. But I think Mendoza, when you take him first overall, he's gonna be on the field before Halloween. I'll put it like that.
Yeah, I said that was a pretty tame statement because, Ryan, you know, like the talk right now is that he's going to start week 1 based on that rookie performance. So we don't have to go all the way there yet, but we do think that we could potentially see him sooner rather than later. Let's end on a quarterback battle where neither player really got you excited. Overreaction to reality. The Browns' quarterback struggles will end with them having the worst record in the NFL.
That feels like an overreaction only because the Cardinals and the Dolphins play in the NFL.
Okay.
That's the difference. Because the Browns' defense is very good, and they're without Jim Schwartz. He has since moved on as the DC, and obviously Myles Garrett was traded for Jared Verse in a first-round pick. But that defense is still going to be really, really, really good, and will keep this offense in games. And offensively, the skill position players have been hugely upgraded from a season ago for Cleveland. There's some questions along the offensive line. They drafted Spencer Fano, who's going to start at left tackle, but they have some other questions. It wasn't from lack of trying in terms of free agency to fix the O-line, but whether it's Deshaun Watson, Shadur Sanders, and the obligatory Dylan Gabriel show there, I don't think Dylan's going to play unless something goes wrong, fair or not. But I think any of those quarterbacks are not going to be the starting quarterbacks in 2027 because they're going to have a draft pick, and they'll probably draft someone whose name we've mentioned a few times, and I won't mention here just for the sake of doing something differently. But unless Miami somehow gets red hot or the Cardinals get red hot, I think that the Browns are saved from being the worst team in football.
I'm loving this. I know we're talking about overreactions, but Ryan, you should hear the reaction from the control room that's filled with a bunch of Dolphins fans right now down here in South Florida. They don't know why you're lumping them in with the Cardinals here. So, man, it's been fun to hear that happening just on the other side of this wall here. But certainly, yes, there are some teams that could compete with the Browns for the worst record in the NFL. Ryan Wilson, always a pleasure talking to you. More opportunities to overreact coming up for week 2 of the NFL preseason. Action starts on Thursday. We got a couple of games. There's more on Friday. And then we get to see those Browns QBs back in action against the Bills on Saturday.